In a project-based industry where more projects equals more money, it's not surprising that many structural engineers end up working overtime in order to meet strict deadlines. And as a structural engineer at a small company, I personally know the pressure of having to pump out projects on a regular basis in very short timelines. Although over the last 2 years, as I've been navigating my graduate years, I've noticed that there are a bunch of unspoken tricks that we as structural engineers can be using to get more done faster. And in this video, I want to go over 7 of these tricks and share with you the ones that save me the most time while at work. Alright, so number 1 is simplify repetitive actions. And what I mean by this is that whenever you find yourself doing a necessary yet repetitive task more than 3 times in a row, you need to find some sort of way of making it easier. For example, whenever I issue a set of structural drawings to a client, I always like to write the same thing. And instead of having to think back to what I've written in the past or looking back at the last time I sent this type of email and copying and pasting, what I've done instead is set up a template within Outlook. So all I need to do is click on this template, add in the project specific details, and then the email's ready to send. Another example of this is changing default settings. And one program where I've done a lot of this is in Bluebeam. Bluebeam is a PDF editing software that's widely used throughout the structural engineering industry, and for me personally, this program is what I use to do all my design markups. When I am doing my markups, I do use a bunch of different tools, and so that I can keep a consistent style, what I've done is gone into all these regular tools that I use and changed the default so everything looks the same. Okay, and number 2 is batch similar tasks together. Once you're in the groove and you've done a task once, it's naturally a lot easier to repeat it a second or even a third time immediately after. And as a structural engineer, we often have a lot of autonomy about how we spend our working hours, so there's lots of opportunities throughout our day where we can take advantage of this. For example, say that you have a project that has 2 buildings in it, and within both of these buildings you need to design a steel portal frame. Instead of solely working through the process for one of the buildings and then coming back to the other building later, design both of these portal frames one after another. Likewise, if you have builders calling you who are wanting to book in inspections, always try and group these inspections together at either the start or the end of your day so that you don't waste as much time traveling, and also so that your day isn't broken up as much. Alright, and number 3 is use templates. What I mean by this is that every time you do a task, there's no need to try and reinvent the wheel. Often a lot of the calculations and checks we need to do follow the exact same process on new projects, so where you can, making a template where you just need to plug in the project specific values can be a huge time saver. One example of where I've been able to do this is with site wind pressure calculations. For the Australian wind design code, there's a bunch of different parameters that you need to find in order to calculate the wind pressure, and by having this template, I don't have to remember which values I need to find or where to find them. All I need to do is run through this list and look at the reference column, and very quickly and easily I know exactly what I need to find and where to look. Okay, next is recycle where possible. One thing I started to notice after I completed my first couple of jobs is that a lot of things repeat themselves, and the best way to save yourself the time and effort of repeatedly doing the same design checks over and over is to document your findings as you go. For example, say that you've done a design for a concrete gravity retaining wall and you did so for a range of different heights. Alongside keeping a copy of the drawn up final design, you should also note down next to that design all the parameters and assumptions you used during that design, so that if a similar sort of thing pops up on another project, it's very easy to reuse that same design. One of the main benefits of doing this is that over time you'll create a full library of basically just ready to go designs, and then as you need you can just go back and pick out what you need. Okay, and another instance of where I found that you can recycle past effort is in your structural analysis models. Here I found that you can set up a base model that already has things like the load case titles and load combinations inputted, so for each new model that you build, you can skip this repetitive part of the process and go straight to the unique aspects like the geometry and the member type and size. Alright, and number 5 is automate calculations. Now, this is probably one of the most obvious time-saving tricks, but sometimes it gets overlooked because of the amount of initial effort required to get things set up. What I mean by this is that if you were to set up a design spreadsheet in Excel for something like the analysis of a cantilever retaining wall, you'd probably want that spreadsheet to be able to handle a range of geometries and also loading types. So building this spreadsheet is no longer as simple as just treating Excel like a calculator, because now you're thinking more broadly about how you want to lay things out and also what sort of design considerations you need to make for other types of configurations and loading scenarios. Although similar to what I said earlier, if you are running into this type of analysis repetitively, it is worth setting up a design spreadsheet because the time time you initially put in to get things set up, you will make back in the long run. Now, besides making your own spreadsheets and automating calculations that way, it's also important to learn and use existing software programs. Spending the time to learn and understand how these design programs work is really what's going to speed up your design work the most, because often it's a lot quicker to learn how these programs work as opposed to trying to make something yourself. Alright, and number 6 is use a checklist. One of the easiest ways to streamline what you need to do and reassure yourself that you're not forgetting anything is to have an outline of exactly what you need to do. For example, when I'm doing shop drawing reviews, I always pull up a checklist that I made that not only outlines the overarching procedure, but it also outlines exactly what I need to be checking on each page, like member sizes and things like bolt hole sizes and bolt spacing. Similar to this, another example of where I've taken advantage of checklists is on site inspections. As a young engineer, it can be quite overwhelming to remember all the different things that you need to check when you're on site, and by having a checklist you can visually see that you've ticked everything off and you can leave feeling a lot more confident. Okay, and number 7 is make how-to guides. What I mean by this is that whenever you learn how something's done or someone gives you a tip, you need to note down whatever that is so you don't have to keep relearning the same thing and asking the same questions. For example, say you've spent some time watching a video or reading a part of a textbook on how to design a steel base plate. After you finish watching that video or reading that part of the textbook, it's really important to note down what you took away from that video or from that reading. I found that by putting things into my own words, it always makes it feel more familiar, and in most cases actually helps me to understand it better, because now it's like I'm trying to explain what I've learned to my future self. In my opinion, the best way to test if you really understand something is to try and teach it to others, so for me, noting things down is a really big help. Okay, and another thing that I make a lot of how-to guides for is different design programs. Often within these programs, there are a lot of different buttons that you need to click in order to enable certain features, and what I like to do is take a screenshot of what all these different buttons look like and write a little description about what they do. Personally, I put this sort of thing into OneNote so that I can quickly access it on my work computer, and by doing this I'm able to take a lot of strain off my brain and avoid having to refer to those long and confusing user manuals or having to search the web for how things are done. Anyways, I hope that you learned something from this video, and if you did enjoy it, you might like this video here where I share 8 habits that help me to become a better engineer, or that video there where I take you through a full day in my life as a structural engineer. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.